McCallum, and I'm the Executive Officer of Mannifera. We are a collective of funders who invest in and partner with civil society organisations that are working to build public trust, transparency and fairness in our democracy and create a more inclusive economy. I'm joining you all today from the unceded land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I give my respect to Wurundjeri elders and to the elders, past and present, of the unceded Aboriginal land that you are all on. I extend this respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us. Mannifera recognises that Australia's democracy will not be complete nor our economy inclusive until we address the impact of 2.5 centuries of colonisation and instate the rights and respect the aspirations of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in our constitution, our structures and systems through to our communities. Today's event with Change Politics is in the spirit of Mannifera's commitment to build stronger partnerships between civil society and philanthropy to achieve our shared ambitions. In this case, the shared ambition between Mannifera and Change Politics is to build a strong civic culture of political participation and increase fairness in political representation. On behalf of Mannifera and Change Politics, I would like to warmly welcome everyone to what is going to be an excellent conversation about how governments can progress seemingly intractable issues and achieve significant reform when politics can make room for citizens to actively participate in this change. Just a bit of housekeeping before we kick off. Please feel free to use the chat function to introduce yourselves. Please ensure that you stay on mute, and a reminder that we are recording this session and we'll share it with everyone afterwards. How this session will run. Firstly, Polly is going to be in conversation with Art, who will share the story of the 2012 Irish Constitutional Convention. We'll then have about 15 minutes for Q&A with Art, with all of you, and we will ask you to put your questions in the chat, and Polly will put these questions to Art. We'll then turn our focus to the current Australian context, and I'll be talking with Polly about what political appetite there is for introducing citizens' assemblies at a federal level and some of the issues that they could be used for. We aim to have a bit of time for you to ask questions before we have some final closing remarks, and we'll wrap up at 6:15 p.m. if you're on the east coast of Australia. So some brief introductions to our speakers before I hand over to them. Art O'Leary is the former Secretary-General to the President of Ireland and currently Secretary-General for Ireland's Electoral Commission. Art ran the 2012 Irish Constitutional Convention that brought MPs and citizens together in one assembly, which led politicians to understand and trust the process, resulting in the ongoing use of the Citizens' Assembly method in Ireland for major issues, including reproductive rights and marriage equality. Polly Cameron is the Director of Change Politics. Polly has a background in innovation, facilitation and social entrepreneurship, including being Program Director for the School of Life in Australia. Polly has expertise in emotional intelligence and human interactions, both great assets when you're working on political reform. So thank you, Art and Polly. Over to you both.
Thank you, Harriet, and echoing the gratitude that Harriet expressed at not only getting up at 10 to 6, but also wearing a suit and a tie. Ladies and gentlemen, it's worth noting. We're so incredibly fortunate to have you here with us today. Art's not only a cracking storyteller, and I don't at all feel nervous about picking you up like that, Art, but of course you were also instrumental at achieving what really every politician would have to concede was an extremely challenging thing to do and to survive politically, which was, of course, to bring about both abortion law reform and same-sex marriage in a deeply Catholic country that was pretty divided over these issues. So they were fairly massive feats for a country to do in a way that actually increased trust and social cohesion. Some of the people on this call are likely familiar with the story, but for those of us who aren't, and also because you tell it so well, can you take us back to the rather humble beginnings of how the Citizens' Convention first came about? Did you and Edna Kenny, who was the then President of Ireland at the time, did you realise you were about to make history?
Oh, good morning, everyone, and greetings from a very dark and wet and cold Dublin. It's lashing rain at the moment, and the temperature is about -2. So very different to what it's like in Australia this morning. Yes, Polly, thank you for that, for the introduction. 10 years ago, I got a phone call. I was happily working as a civil servant in the Irish Parliament, and one of my responsibilities at the time was communications in the Parliament. And I was sitting at home on the sofa watching reruns of The West Wing when my phone rang around 10 o'clock at night, and my heart sank, because in my job, or in anybody's job, nobody rings you at 10 o'clock at night to say they're having a good day. So I assumed it was the editor of a newspaper who was ringing to say that they were writing a story that was going to bring my house down and make my life miserable for the following week. But it was our Prime Minister, Enda Kenny, who rang and said, Art, how are you? I have a job for you. And I said, well, this will be a short conversation, Prime Minister, because I already have a job. Thank you very much. And he said, no, we have, I have this thing, and it's called the Constitutional Convention. Listen, it's never, ever going to work, but it's in our program for government. We've made a commitment, so we have to do it. And I said, well, I knew nothing about it or didn't know anything about it. He said, what's it all about? He said, we're going to put 100 people in a room, 33 politicians and 66 citizens, and we're going to ask them some questions on issues that the government needs some guidance. And I said, well, why are you doing it if you think it's not going to work? And he said, well, listen, we told everybody that we were going to do it, and this is a government of change, and we want to try some new initiatives in deliberative democracy. So we're going to try. And so we spoke about it, and Ireland was in the middle of the financial crisis at the time. The state was scrabbling around the back of the sofa for coins to pay our teachers and nurses and keep the lights on and everything. And so we spoke about this Constitutional Convention, what it might look like and how it might work. And at the end of it, I said, well, listen, if I've got you straight, Prime Minister, I can do whatever I like with this Constitutional Convention, as long as I don't spend any money or kill anybody. And he said, I knew you were the fella for me, you know. And I rang my boss afterwards and said, listen, I got to go for about 6 months. The Prime Minister wants me to go and do something, and but keep my seat warm, I'll be back. And it astonishes me that 10 years later, I'm still talking about it. And more worryingly, from my perspective, I'm still doing it, because I am currently secretary to the 2 national citizens' assemblies that are going on right now, biodiversity loss and the local government here in Dublin, and a directly elected mayor. So, but I've promised myself that on January the 21st, the final meeting of our biodiversity loss citizens' assembly is going to happen. And that's me done. I need to go off and do the job that people pay me handsomely to go and do. So, but it has been an absolute blast. For the last 10 years, as you mentioned, Polly, citizens' assemblies have transformed the way Irish people have led their lives. You know, we have delivered, people may have heard about the 2 big issues, you know, marriage equality and abortion in this country, 2 subjects that it was absolutely impossible to have a conversation on. For the last 60 years, we, as a traditional Catholic conservative country, we've been unable to have a proper conversation, about a civilized conversation about abortion, because as soon as you start the conversation, people retreat to their own spectrums and they stay there shouting at each other. And what a citizens' assembly does, it provides a very civilized environment and respectful environment in which to have a conversation about these things. And but it's not only just the social issues, marriage equality and abortion. The assemblies have made dozens and dozens of recommendations on everything from climate change to political and institutional change, and how we manage referendums in this country, and a whole variety of issues. And they work. And interestingly, in our most recent citizens' assembly, we asked 100 people who were in the room why they decided to get involved. You know, so we selected 100 people, and they're representative of our society. So why do you want to get involved? And a third of them said that they were interested in the subject. Another third said that they were they wanted to make a contribution to public policy. And from me, the most interesting third was the third that said citizens' assemblies are a way of getting hard jobs done in this country, you know, and even in a short 10-year period, and 10 years is nothing in political and institutional terms, but in 10 years, citizens' assemblies have gone from not existing to being such a critical part of the political infrastructure that people automatically assume that every time that there's a hard job, we better set up a citizens' assembly to find out what the answer to this hard question is.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I'm keen to then, as you say, you've been doing this for 10 years, and to ask you, you know, honestly, what have been the biggest challenges and the learnings that have kind of come out of that, give you a moment to think about that, just so that there's no kind of assumed knowledge as well here in the space. I imagine a lot of you are familiar with what a citizens' assembly is and what we're talking about in this constitutional assembly, but just as a top level for people who might not be as familiar, really a citizens' assembly is where you take a group of people chosen by democratic lottery. So they're chosen at random, and they're stratified so that they roughly represent the community that are being affected by the decision. So they match the census, and they're given, you know, as I described, plenty of time and access to experts and a diverse range of sources to come up with solutions as a group. And, you know, we'll have time for questions later down the track. But to that question of, it's been 10 years, did it work straight away?
Listen, I mean, it kind of did. You know, we made dozens of mistakes, by the way, and all of which, I mean, I tell people about mostly over a drink in order to dull the pain of all of these mistakes. But it worked. It has evolved so much in the last 10 years. Every citizens' assembly, we try to do something different, learn from our previous experience, etc. But the three things, you know, in the 10 years, if I've learned anything, it is that the three most important things about citizens' assemblies that are absolutely critical to get right, it cannot succeed without this, are one, the representativeness of the room. You know, when you look into that room full of 100 people, you need to see your society represented. So everybody in Ireland, when they look into the room, they can see themselves there, or if they don't see themselves there, they can see their voice represented. It's so critical, you know, and this is always the hardest challenge, you know, because I mean, can you imagine 10 years ago, nobody had ever heard of constitutional conventions, and we sent a polling company into the field, and they knocked on the door, and I can imagine the scene, you know, a polling worker turns up in the Main Street, Ballygo backwards in a rural Irish town and says, I've got an amazing opportunity for you. You can spend 12 weekends in the next year for no money with 99 other people looking at issues that the government think are important, you know, and only 1 in 40 people said yes to our first citizens' assembly, and that is hard. In our most recent one, we've changed our method of recruitment, and we've taken the lead from New Democracy here in Australia. We have started writing randomly to households all around the country. So we wrote to 20,000 households, randomly selected, and said, we have a citizens' assembly, government has a problem, we don't know the answer to this, will you come and help us work it out? And it's signed by our Prime Minister. And the response rate for these internationally is something around 5%, you know, so we were expecting around 1,000 people to respond. 2,600 people wrote back and said, I'd like to give up 6 weekends this year to take part in a citizens' assembly. And when we have the 2,600, then that's a beautiful number to be able to select your representative grouping. So it is quite easy at the outset, because age, region, and gender is important. So we have 51 women and 49 men, because we've got more women than men living in this country. Then age, you know, we've got 11 people between the age of 18 and 24, and we've got 23 people from our capital city in Dublin, etc. So that bit is easy. but we need to delve a little bit deeper. You know, we need to to make sure that our social classes are represented. 4% of the population of Ireland are farmers, so we need 4 farmers in the room. You know, 11% of the people in our country are have a disability, so we need 11 people with a disability in the room. We need 17 people who weren't born on the island of Ireland, etc., etc. So as we chip away with our census here, we try to make the room as representative as possible. So and we randomly select people when they give us the information. We run an algorithm to say, well, here's Ireland in one room. So the representativeness is hugely important. And our abortion Citizens' Assembly, probably the most controversial one, and certainly the one that had to be handled with the greatest sensitivity, was absolutely terrific, because they made recommendations, having considered the matter over 6 or 7 months, and we did it in full public view. The citizens made recommendations for a very liberal abortion regime, which shocked our political system and shocked the media as well, because nobody was expecting this. This is not Ireland's view, surely, and the government assumed that they would make modest recommendations around a limited form of abortion, maybe in the case of rape or incest, or where the life of the mother was in danger. But no, they went for the full range of access to abortion. And the citizens voted 66-34 in the room to make recommendations on this form of abortion. And when the question was put to the people, the answer was 65-35 in a full referendum of the Irish people, which proves 2 things. Of course, one is that the room was perfectly representative of the Irish people, and secondly, and more importantly perhaps, is that the Irish people were so far ahead in their thinking on these issues, way beyond what the political system understood it to be. And we may have a few behavioral economists in the room this evening, but it's what the behavioral economists these days call the wisdom of crowds, you know. And most recently in the pandemic, Irish people were wearing masks on public transport long before the government told them that they had to, you know, because they looked at the evidence and said, well, I'm going to wear a mask, and for public health reasons, I'm going to protect myself, I'm going to protect my fellow passengers. And then 4 months later, when the government came out and said, you're going to have to wear masks on public transport, we all laughed because we were doing it. People know, people understand. And if you give them access to enough information, they will make the right decisions. That's the first issue. Yeah.
No, sorry, I'll go on.
Yeah, that's the first issue, representativeness. The second issue is the question itself. You know, the citizens' assemblies have been so successful in this country that the political system is tempted that to every hard problem that I come across, let's create a citizens' assembly. You know, so there are 4 citizens' assemblies in the pipeline at the moment, and there's another couple coming further down the line. So, but not every issue is suitable for a citizens' assembly. So don't be tempted to send every single problem to a group of 100 people, because you might ask, for instance, these days, should nuclear power be an energy source for any country? And that could be legitimate enough. But would you ask a group of people, of randomly selected citizens, to design you a nuclear power station? Probably not. I mean, there are some questions which are best left to experts, etc. But if you have an issue that is broad enough, with a wide enough range of options or possible solutions, then it is likely that it will be suitable to, you know, we've had a couple which clearly weren't suitable for this citizens' assembly. We asked them to have a look at institutional reform in our parliamentary reform of our parliament, etc. And yeah, listen, it was like pushing a boulder up the hill. It was too difficult because, and there are other issues, you know, even binary questions. You know, if you ask a room full of people a binary question, should our presidential term be reduced from 7 years to 5 years? I thought this question would take us about 10 minutes to deal with, because this is a simple yes and no, 7 years versus 5 years. But no, it took a full weekend to look at that question, because the citizens, they said, well, no, we should keep it at 7 years. But they went on to make recommendations on the nomination process for the presidency, the age of candidacy for the presidency, campaign spending limits, donations, yada, yada, and a whole series of recommendations around the presidency, not just that. So when you ask a room full of 100 people a question, then it's difficult, because you will discover very quickly that your ankle bone is connected to your elbow, because all of these issues are related. And the final thing that you need to take care of is the outcome. What are you going to do with the citizens' recommendations? You need to be absolutely crystal clear at the very beginning that we need to deal. We're going to take your recommendations and we're going to do something with them, because the citizens work very hard. We've been fortunate in that regard. Our government has been really good about this, because the normal process is that the Parliament accepts the recommendations, creates a special parliamentary committee of politicians to look at them, and then the government looks at both reports and comes into the Parliament, and they have a special debate where the government outlines which recommendations are going to be accepted and when they're going to be implemented, and which recommendations they're not going to accept, and they explain why. They have to explain why very publicly. And this is another important feature, is that the political system retains control. And it's not a veto. We don't describe it as a veto necessarily, because the government have a wide range of priorities, and we will find when citizens get into a single issue that they are looking in isolation at one issue, and the government has a much broader responsibility, etc. So there may be reasons why recommendations aren't accepted, but the government has to come out and explain why. And some of the citizen assemblies which didn't work around the world revolve around this particular problem, because some governments have set up citizens assemblies to solve a problem that they had, and said, we will just simply will implement your recommendations. And then when they get the recommendations, then they're unimplementable, and that causes a problem for governments. President Macron had a problem with his climate change assembly, where he said, well, he had a gilet jaune problem, that there are protests on the street about carbon taxes and all sorts. So he created a citizens assembly to make recommendations on the issue of climate change, and said, send me your recommendations and I'll implement them, we'll make this problem go away. A year and a half later, 150 citizens made, having worked for all that time, made a whole series of recommendations, and President Macron looked at them and said, well, I can't do that one, or this one, or this one. And so now he's got two problems. Now he's got a climate change protest problem, and now he's got a disappointed citizen assembly problem as well. And many of the citizens on that climate change assembly turned into activists and started running for political office because of this, as they saw it, this betrayal and this refusal to do that. So don't make promises that you can't keep. So there are the three big things I've learned in the last 10 years, Polly.
They're important learnings, Art, and I'm glad that you're highlighting them. And you really can't understate that last point enough, can you? How crucial it is to ensure that there's, a level of authority that's pragmatic and realistic as well, and that you've got the people in power that are kind of tracking as well the process of the citizens' assembly, so that they're aware of what's coming through. So you don't have that problem of where have these come from, and what are these recommendations, and the problem you outlined with Macron. I'm interested, something that we talk about when we're, talking about citizens' assemblies is that, when you have a problem, the scope that politicians have to solve it is sort of here. And when you open it up to people in a citizens' convention, or a citizens' assembly rather, expand those options so dramatically, because you don't have those same political incentives that exist. But why do you feel like citizens' assemblies work so well to solve these issues? Why can't the political class solve them, in your opinion?
Yeah, listen, I mean, there are many reasons for that. And maybe it is a peculiarly Irish cultural issue, but I don't think so. I think there's a hunger out there at the moment for citizens to be involved in decision making. And the political system also thinks that their citizens should be much more involved. The two big criticisms of assemblies in this country, and whenever I talk about this, it seems to strike a chord wherever, and I've spoken in 21 different countries in the last 6 months about citizens' assemblies, and I didn't go, I don't go knocking on people's doors saying, please, can I come and talk in your country? They come and say, we need to do something about citizen engagement, and we hear you have a story to tell, so I just, a bit like this, I come and tell the story. But the two big criticisms always for citizens' assemblies in this country are, one is that, well, we already have a citizens' assembly, it's called our parliament. Why do we need to spend more money on getting more people involved, which will delay the government and the parliament? They just need to get on with it, and I always say in response to this is that citizens' assemblies are not a replacement, or they're not a threat to the political system. They are a support. They help with the decision-making process. It enhances decisions, it makes them much richer, and it gives people another opportunity to look at other perspectives. Because normally we develop policy in this country, mostly like you, I suspect, in that we have a government who is elected and they have a manifesto and say, here's all the things we're going to do, and here's what we believe, and here's the legislation we're going to bring in. And as part of that process, they consult with academics and they consult with policy specialists, people like me in civil service departments, who are policy specialists in particular areas. And they also consult with engaged stakeholders. So people who are going to be affected by the legislation, they go and talk to them. All we have done, in addition to those three groups, we have added another group, which is randomly selected individuals. And so our three-legged stool is now a four-legged chair that's involved in the decision making, and it has been extraordinarily successful for reasons I might talk about in a while. The second criticism is that, well, listen, I mean, this is just a big focus group. So why on earth would you want a focus group to be making decisions on our recommendations on issues? And there is one big difference between a citizens' assembly and a focus group, is that with a focus group, a polling company gathers a representative group of people, they put them in a room, and they ask them questions, to establish their opinions. So they ask them, what's your favorite breakfast cereal? Who's your favorite political party leader? Should we have abortion in this country? Yada, yada, and a big long list of things. And at the end of that couple of hours, they write down all the answers, and then they publish these bullet points as facts. Here is what the Irish people think about all of these issues. So that's a focus group. With the citizens' assembly, we put a representative group of people in a room and we fill with information. We give them as much information as they need to become experts in this particular subject. So we bring in some of the finest minds, the finest academics to speak to them. We bring in advocacy groups to put forward different solutions and offer different perspectives. And in every part of that process, the citizens are talking to each other at round tables. They're discussing these things, they're asking questions, and at the end of 6 months, they really know something about this. And at that point, we ask them the question: what do you think about whatever the question is? And that's the difference between a focus group. Is all about information and reasoned opinions. And for our most recent citizens' assembly on local government in Ireland, in Dublin, our capital city, on the first day, we asked our citizens how much they knew about local government and who their local mayor was and what local government services were provided. 70% of our citizens didn't know the name of their local mayor, and 6 months later, they were designing intricate local government structures for the city that would fill your heart with joy, because they did it with a confidence and a flair and an authority that they had been on a journey, and I mean, I said at the final meeting, look at yourselves, you're saying, well, listen, we'd like the local government in Dublin to be like a bit like Greater Manchester in the UK, but we don't like the lack of accountability there. So we do like the Boston model, where there is an assembly that provides an accountability, and New York, they're allowed a petition for the impeachment of the mayor, and then in Paris they have a permanent citizens assembly, and they put all these together and made recommendations, and it was extraordinary. It was a journey that they had been all in on, and a learning journey for many. So why does it work? I have no idea. It's a bit like I'm making my Christmas puddings at the moment, and that noise you can hear in the background is the pudding steaming and it's bubbling away. I mean, how do all these ingredients turn into that big bowl of deliciousness? I've no idea, but it does.
Well, I think you might have some idea, Art. I might try and dig into it a little bit, because there's some great questions actually that are coming through on the chat. We'll try and get through as many as we can, and one of them kind of takes us right into the room. So if we're, imagining placing ourselves in the room where, this extended period of time and, poring over information and having these kind of smaller roundtable conversations are going on, which are all kind of key ingredients, as you like to your analogy about the delicious Christmas pudding that comes at the other end. And there was a question that's come through around managing power amongst the participants, which might also be interesting when you reflect on the mixed model, of course, that was used in the earlier citizens conventions, and the number of kind of politicians versus citizens in the room. So the question is around, how do you manage and balance power and minority voices being heard in the room?
Yeah, it's so important, and I joke with the Citizens Assembly staff about this all the time, and whenever we complain about some of the more difficult customers that we have in the room, I always say, well, listen, if you assume that 10% of the Irish population is clinically insane, but not under medication, there should be at least 10 people in the room that are difficult and they're mad and etc. So we actively go and seek the mad people, try to identify them early, because managing that power dynamic in the room is very difficult. There are some people who gravitate to speak all the time. An idea pops into their heads, they call for the microphone, and they say, well, no, hold on a second, there's no, you need to use your filter here, etc. So we have to manage it. We had, as you said, I mean, our first assembly had 1/3 politicians and 2/3 citizens, and that was hard because politicians tend to they know a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff, and they tend to gravitate towards a microphone. And our citizens at our first meeting of our first one, they pushed back a little bit and said, well, listen, we're not going to be pushed around by you guys, we're here because we have a voice, etc. And one senior politician, I won't mention his name because he's actually a minister in the current government, but he took the microphone on 4 occasions at that meeting to say how important it was that the ordinary citizens had a voice in this process, and the irony of that was completely lost on him, because again, it's a way. So we have to manage the room. We do it very simply. We've got 6 principles in that room, and these are principles by which we live or die. One is respect. You will respect everybody's opinion in that room. We have 0 tolerance for conflict, disrespect, or any kind of showboating or belittling of anybody's opinion. Respect is paramount, and this is why we were able to provide a safe space for people to express an opinion. They may not agree with you, but they will be respectful of that as well. And you can talk about it, and you can offer different opinions, etc. But you cannot disrespect anybody else. Transparency is another one. Everybody gets to see everything in our room. It's a very simple process here, is that all of our meetings are live streamed. You can go on the web. If you miss them live, you can watch them back on our YouTube channel. Every single scrap of paper that crosses my desk ends up on our website, because everybody gets to see everything. There are no hidden agendas. There's no anything like that. Yeah. Equality of voice is another issue. Everybody's opinion counts exactly the same in that room. So my retired bus driver, who stands up and says, listen, I don't understand this, I know nothing about this, that voice is as important to me and to the assembly members as my heart surgeon or my engineer or whatever, who might be very knowledgeable around a whole load of things. Fairness is the fourth principle. Everybody is treated fairly in that room, whether it is a citizen, whether it's an academic coming in to present, whether it's an advocate, etc. For issues like abortion and marriage equality, where there were very, very polarized opinions on these issues, we treated everybody the same. So the Catholic Church was treated in the same way as the LGBT groups and the women's groups as well. And if one got 20 minutes, the other got 20 minutes, etc. And they were all treated exactly the same. Efficiency is the fifth principle, which is, listen, it's important. We recognize how valuable our citizens' time is. So we try and make the most of our weekends together. And we also acknowledge that, well, this is taxpayers' money that we're spending. We treat our citizens very, very well. We want them to come back for our next meeting, but we don't waste money in any way. And finally, and this is the bit which surprises most people, collegiality is another principle. I don't know whether anyone in this room has ever been to an Irish wedding, but the Saturday night of a weekend meeting is like the evening of an Irish wedding. So we go and have dinner together, we go and have a drink together, and we build relationships. I am still friends on Facebook with 65 of the 66 citizens from the first Constitutional Convention. And the 66th person, it's not that we had a falling out, he died. So I can't do much about that. But people build relationships and they forge strong relationships. And we purposely set out to create a family atmosphere, is that we have been asked by the government to do a big job. Let's get down and do it. So you might have different opinions, let's work them all out, etc. But that collegiality is important. So that's what the room feels like, Polly. And we try very hard to make sure that it stays that way.
And what a stark contrast to how it looks normally in politics. So, Parliament, it looks very different. There's a couple of questions people are curious, I think, about kind of the long-term shape of the implementation of citizens' assemblies. And there's questions around, is it now a requirement for politicians to consider citizens' assembly recommendations, and how has this sort of process has been embedded? Of course, you mentioned Paris, which has implemented a permanent citizens' assembly. What does permanence look like in Ireland, or what is the shape, I suppose, of Irish governance now, with having run these now for 10 years?
Yeah, and permanence is an issue, and I know there's a big call in the academic community to create formal institutional arrangements to create permanent citizens' assemblies, and it's not something that I necessarily agree with. There's no difficulty with it. If there's a need for it, absolutely. And the citizens' assemblies that have been created, mostly within local government structures, are used for the citizens themselves to create issues or to discover issues and to bring forward issues for debate and make recommendations, etc. Our national citizens' assemblies, they work a little bit differently because they tend to be government and parliament backed, and we have, as I mentioned, 4 citizens' assemblies in this current program for government, which is to bring us to 2025. And our Prime Minister has announced recently in the Parliament that he'd like a citizens' assembly on Ireland's neutrality following the war in the Ukraine. Ireland has a constitutional position in relation to neutrality. We are militarily neutral, but not politically neutral. And as a country, we need to have a conversation around that as well. So it looks as if for the next 3 years anyway, we are going to be wall-to-wall citizens' assemblies. And then the largest opposition party, who would like to be in government in 2025, have already indicated that they want to create a citizens' assembly to look at the most complex issue, United Ireland, to how to deal with the North and to have a conversation around what a United Ireland might look like. So we don't have a permanent citizens' assembly, but we do have what on the face of it looks like another 4 or 5 citizens' assemblies in the next 5 years. And if that doesn't strike me as permanent, then nothing does, because we have a permanent secretariat within and have had a permanent secretariat for the last 10 years within the Prime Minister's office, well, resourced from the Prime Minister's office. But it's not permanent per se, but it seems to be part of the political infrastructure now, because it seems to have created this niche for itself. When we have complex issues, too sensitive to be dealt with politically, or maybe too early to reach a political decision, we have a way of finding a way of informing the public and bringing it forward.
Yeah.
Interestingly, after just the final point on this, after the abortion referendum, there was an exit poll done, and people coming out and were asked what way they voted, etc. Interesting, they were already also asked where did they get their information on which to base their decision what way to vote, and 40% of them said they got it from the Citizens' Assembly footage, and material. And that's an extraordinary thing. In 5 years, they've gone from Citizens' Assemblies not existing to be the trusted source of information on a particular issue. And this was before, as a global community, we started having this conversation about misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, and trusted sources. The Irish people, the wisdom of crowds, had already found their trusted source, and this is where they go to. And it will be the same for any future ones, I suspect, as well.
Yeah, it's such an extraordinary answer, and it really goes to what you were saying about the proof of the success of citizens' assemblies in Ireland and the uptake is that it almost feels like there isn't a need to create that sort of permanent mechanism, because there's just so much political buy-in across the spectrum, and there's such kind of support and awareness in the public generally to have that kind of, recruitment percentage, that number of people that say, yes, I'm going to put my hand up and be a part of this, from both sides. It's so strong that it's sort of perpetuating itself now is really remarkable. We've got just a couple more minutes of Q&A with you. There was a quick question just to clarify whether citizens' assemblies in Ireland are being used at a local government as well as, and we're speaking on a national level at the moment, but is it across levels of government?
Yeah, not so much. It's interesting, actually, because in most countries, they start at local level and prove to be successful and then work their way up. We as we tend to do, we did things the other way around, but they are increasingly being used, not just perhaps by local authorities, but also by large state agencies. Our National Water Company now has a citizens' jury now to test issues as well, to ask them questions about, well, where are we going to invest our money and how are we going to deal with this particular problem, etc. So water, electricity, our healthcare agency also has a citizens' jury where they talk about prioritization of health services in this country as well. So they are increasingly being used, following the example of the national one. But it's an interesting question, yeah.
And just whilst we're here, we have to say a particular hello to Murray McDonald, who's also tuned in. He's mentioned that he was a part of our Victorian Citizens Jury as well in 2016. So it's wonderful to have you here, Murray. Final kind of question as well around the difference in the politics that are two-party dominant versus multi-party. That one's just sort of come through. Harry, did you want to speak a bit? Is that clear to you?
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, the good thing about citizens' assemblies is that they simply ignore the politics of this, and when politicians are involved in the process, they tend to work reasonably well together because they're used to working together in parliamentary committees, etc. So I think that there tends to be cross-party cooperation. They may not agree on the final result, but the citizens, with a 100-person citizens-only assembly, we absolutely blithely ignore the politics of any of this. And it's all. I mean, I love getting the phone call from government departments in particular, on issues to say that, well, listen, I see you're running a citizens assembly. We'll send you all the material. We'll help you design the program and yada yada. We'll make sure that you know everything you need to know. And I always say, sometimes very rudely, if they're persistent, is that, well, the government already asked you for your opinion, and they looked at it, and they still don't know what to do. So so they've asked us to do it. So so you don't get to say how we do this and how we approach this. And this is very simple, is that you can't sit the exam and correct the paper as well. So let us go and sit the exam, let us do our work, and you can correct our homework afterwards, you know. So so once we are established to be independent of government, we ignore everything except the subject and the members themselves. You know, it is such a democratic room, and the citizens get on their first day. I always say it's a stupid thing to say, presumably, but perhaps. But I always say, well, listen, I have 100 bosses now. So tell me what you want to do, and that's what I do. And they're saying, well, no, you've done this before. You tell us what we're supposed to be doing. No, that's not the way it works. You know, this room decides. It is very democratic, you know, and by the end of the process, they really understand that they get to set the agenda, they get to select who it is they hear from, and they get to make recommendations. My only role in that room is as a support to the members.
I love your humility. You're like the humble revolutionary. We're lucky to have you, although actually to that point, you recently came to Australia. We were lucky to see you on that trip, and I believe that you had quite a few interesting meetings, and there was some interest in Australia on particular topics that are relevant for us. Did you want to share anything about that trip and maybe what came up?
Yeah, interestingly, I spoke in a couple of universities, and I spoke at a couple of events around, because I was there wearing my electoral commission hat, because you should be very proud as a group of your electoral commission. By the way, this is the gold standard for electoral commissions. You guys do electoral commissions like nobody else. We're establishing an electoral commission for the first time in Ireland, and I went to Australia just to have a look at how this gold standard works, and you guys do extraordinary work, and you should be very proud. But while I was there, I spoke about citizens' assemblies, and at one of the events, there's a Peter Harcher for the Sydney Morning Herald was at it, and I told the story, and he came to me afterwards and said, do you mind if I write about it? And I said, okay, no problem. And he said, was all of that on the record? And there are no words that horrifies a civil servant more than being asked by a journalist, was that on the record? Because then I started, what did I say? Did I say anything that might have been controversial that would get me into trouble? But I thought no more of it. I had a conversation with Peter over the next couple of days, and but he wrote an article in the Sydney Morning Herald, which all my colleagues are teasing me about, you know, because the headline was "The Irishman Who Could Change the Shape of Australia." You know, I'm a fella in a grey suit with a comb over. My job is to be invisible, and this limelight doesn't suit me. But the one thing that that the newspaper article generated was some serious political interest in citizens' assemblies, because I had a meeting with Minister Thistlethwaite about who's Minister for the Republic, and it sounds like the best job in the country to me. You know, his job is to find a way of delivering a republic in the second Albanese government. You know, so anyway, we had a meeting, and we spoke about the possible benefits of a citizens' assembly in looking at this particular issue. And I said, well, listen, it's a big issue. There are a number of solutions. There's a yes and there's a no, and there's something in between, and there's various shades of the spectrum as well. It looks to me as if it's a perfect subject. So the minister is going to come over and have a look at one of our citizens' assemblies in action. When we're conducting a citizens' assembly on the drug use in this country next year. So we'll be looking at legalization, decriminalization, treatment, education, all of these, the full spectrum, and the minister is going to come over and have a look. So it is not just the local issues like Murray has been involved in Victoria. I mean, there are questions which are suitable for a bigger one. You know, the other issue, the voice, was another issue which came, and another minister was in touch in relation to that. Not so sure that that is so suitable for a citizens' assembly, because it does appear as if the question has been settled, and what people are looking for is a way of communicating the benefits or the outcomes of this to the people in order to advocate for a successful referendum. You know, and I was astonished, you know, to look at. I mean, I read the Australian Constitution before I went, and I brought a copy with me, and I was astonished at how few successful referendums there have been in Australia over the years, because I think there have been 42 referendums, but only 8 of them were successful. So it does pile a bit of pressure onto any government that's trying to run a referendum, and the more you can do to help that process, if you truly believe in constitutional change, the better. Australian people are clearly very attached to their constitution. There have been no changes since 1967, you know, so clearly means that you're very happy with it, and it works well.
Yeah, this might be a good moment to talk about Australia. Obviously, we're so hungry for that sort of change. And as I said in the opener, you know, Ireland we see as kind of a bit of a beacon and a shining light for where we sort of want to get to. But it's exciting, as you said, with people like Peter Harcher at the SMH, and of course with what's happening with Allegra Spender and Canberra, and talking at Radio National about these projects, which we can get into. Feels like the momentum is also building here. So it's exciting to have these conversations now with you.
Thank you.
So,
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much to both of you, and thanks to everyone as well who asked such great questions. So we're going to lead into a conversation with Polly now, and Art, thank you so much for agreeing to stay on the call. We'd love to have your input as well. And so Polly, I wanted to turn the focus onto the work of Change Politics, and I guess the advocacy that you are doing to champion the use of citizens' assemblies in Australia, and particularly on a federal level. And just last week, you were briefing many parliamentarians in Canberra on a roadmap of how the federal government could use citizens' assemblies to address the issue of political donations, which is exciting. It's another critical area for reform if we're to achieve greater fairness in political participation in Australia. And this is an issue that, in particular, Independent MP Allegra Spender has spoken publicly about in the last week or so, and I believe one of the parliamentarians that you've been working with. So I guess based on your really recent work in Canberra, as well as your ongoing advocacy work of Change Politics, can you give us a sense of what the receptivity is like in Australia around the idea of citizens' assemblies?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's always a thrill when someone in Canberra in Parliament House asks you to come in and have a conversation about these processes. And we take briefings and have conversations with politicians across the spectrum. But it's been really exciting to see Allegra Spender really come out and put her head sort of above the parapet, if you will, in favour of really quite seriously considering using a citizens' assembly on the topic of political donations. And I suppose it's a bit of a byproduct of what we've seen with the recent change in government and the election of the growing kind of communities movement, really, that there's more and more people in Parliament House talking about doing democracy differently and looking at representation seriously and bringing greater trust and integrity into government. And we're standing on the sidelines going, where the how, where the mechanism. This is a solution and a way to kind of get us there. And donations is, a perfect topic. So we were there, speaking to a number of people about what an actual roadmap could look like to doing in that, Australia's first National Assembly on donations. It's a topic that it's hard to expect everyday people to trust a decision that politicians will come up with themselves and generate rules. You know, there's a bit of a poacher gamekeeper kind of issue there, and so it'd be a great topic. But there's many others, and you know, as Art mentioned with Matt Thistlethwaite, the interest around using a citizens' assembly on a republic. So there's growing interest, and there's been citizens' assemblies being used on a local council level and a state level, but our focus is definitely on getting a federal citizens' assembly up would really kind of change the whole dynamic here in the movement in Australia.
Yep. And well done on, I guess, seizing the political opportunity that now exists with this very different parliament that we have since May this year. Acknowledging earlier, Art, that you talked about our electoral commission being gold standard, and that's great to know. But I guess we are a little bit behind many jurisdictions on the introduction of deliberative democracy methods and citizens' assemblies. So, Polly, can you talk about how is Australia tracking against the rest of the world in regards to this kind of democratic reform?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Australia has quite a solid track record of being democratically innovative. I mean, we were one of the first countries in the world to give women the right to vote, and the first to give women the right to stand for parliament. But a lot of what we have inherited as well, and a lot of the democracies around the world are still suffering from really using kind of 18th century tools to combat real 21st century problems. So there's certainly a lot that we need to reform. And in terms of front runners globally, of course, there's Ireland that, you know, we're highlighting tonight, but Belgium are really leading the charge, and they've established a permanent committee of people that are selected by lot, and Paris, which we've spoken about this evening. But it is an exciting moment in Australia, as we've been speaking about, with a number of projects. I mean, even just the New Democracy Foundation, which was mentioned earlier with Art, and, you know, try and make themselves useful, and have provided a bit of advice around recruitment design, you know, for Ireland, have run 32 projects now in the last 10 years, citizens' assembly projects in Australia. But the growing appetite for doing a nationals assembly is the kind of scale that would really be momentous. And there's growing appetite in Parliament. We have to be, you know, the sort of vague terms I'm speaking about. Of course, it's, you know, the reason why we're able to have conversations with different politicians about their appetite and interest in using these methodologies and the different topics they're interested in. The reason why we can have those conversations is, you know, because we handle them sensitively. So it's suffice to say that there are more people across the spectrum in federal parliament that are seriously looking at how they can use a citizens' assembly to, as Art says, to get hard things done.
Yeah, it's exciting. And, you know, of course, citizens' assemblies have been able to really progress quite sort of intractable issues in countries like Ireland, and of course, Australia has its share of issues that we really need to move forward on that have been stuck for some time. So what are the issues, or where do you think that citizens' assemblies could be most helpful in Australia, in addition to the political donations one that you're working on?
Yeah, cool. I mean, donations and the Republic that we mentioned. As Art says, anything that's not a binary is and something that's complicated that does require considered time is where we sort of fit in. And, you know, as our stance, we don't really have any kind of position on any issue. We certainly don't feel like there's any one particular right answer on any kind of topic. We're quite topic agnostic, but we're very committed to proving that the process works as we see overseas. But of course, there's, I mean, even any topic like what Ireland has been working on with biodiversity, we've shown that there are more and more people in this country that are concerned about climate. There's a housing crisis that can be looked at, youth crime, aged care, I mean, pandemic response. It really kind of, the list is a little bit endless, not to sound too ambitious, but there's a lot of problems that we're facing as a country that could really benefit from having a process like a citizens' assembly to really slow down and take the time to bring people together to address them.
Yeah. And I guess, as you said before, there have been examples of it being used in different jurisdictions, state and local as well. So there's there's some practice that we can learn from already in Australia around, I guess, Australians' willingness to participate in this sort of process as well. So I guess we've now got a little bit of time if people have got some questions for Polly and or Art. Just trying to see if I can view the chat as well. Feel free to put your questions in. I guess it would be really good to hear from you, Polly, and this might also bring you in, Art, around your support for change politics. But what's next? What are you going to be working on? What do you want people to know about the work that Change Politics will be doing?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, we're focused on getting up a federal project, but what we know works is that at the end of the day, just by the nature of politics, politicians really do care about numbers and making sure that they can make a decision that doesn't feel politically risky. So if they know that they have embedded support and awareness for these sorts of processes in the broader public, they'll be much more likely to take them on. So we're really focused at generating that visible support. So, if you go to our website, the Change Politics website, you'll see there's, do you support the use of citizens' assemblies? There's a question that people can sign and support, and we're capturing people's interest by electorate as well, so that when we have these conversations with various representatives, we can really back up that there is a kind of growing interest and awareness and support for these measures. So certainly the numbers, and that can translate to any kind of following us or supporting us in whatever way. And to that end, I think I put my email address in my video screen, but I'll put it in the chat also. There's an enormous array of ways that you can support if you feel like democratic innovation in this country is timely and is needed in this way. To be in touch, and we can continue the conversation. And we're working on in the later part of next year to put together an in-person summit on citizens' assemblies as well. So it's worth staying connected if this is of interest.
Yeah. There is a question around, I guess, the most urgent area that we need action on is being climate, the climate emergency. And so is this something that you've looked at? I mean, Art, you've talked about there's a related biodiversity referendum you're dealing with, but is this an area that, Polly, that you think we could accelerate climate action through the use of something like citizens' assemblies? Or
Absolutely. I mean, climate could be a brilliant topic for sure for a citizens' assembly. We just need to have the political appetite, I think, to take that up. There's still some bruising from, I think it was in 2012, the Julia Gillard moment, where she proposed using a citizens' assembly on climate. At the time, it was just not handled well, and the receptivity wasn't quite there. It was a very different sort of political climate, but a lot has changed in those 10 years, and certainly doing an assembly on that topic, I think, would be really powerful. And we're watching closely at certainly what Ireland's done in biodiversity as well, around what we can learn around that.
What's it been like?
Just on that point, I mean, another issue that people speak about is that, well, listen, we don't have time for citizens' assembly, need more urgent action. But this will always boil down to political will, because we went from making recommendations on marriage equality to constitutional change in 23 months, and constitutional change tends to be glacial, that these things, and for good reason, by the way. Constitutional change shouldn't happen quickly, and it shouldn't happen easily, but it was the political will to deal with it was the important bit. A citizens' assembly on climate will take maybe 6 months, and I think that investment in not just making recommendations on action, but to focus the public spotlight on the issue and to inform people of the gravity of the issue. We've discovered the same with our biodiversity law citizens' assembly. People didn't understand, the gravity of the problem, because we were talking about species loss, and some people, our citizens are saying, well, species loss, I mean, does it matter if that ugly beetle doesn't exist anymore, or we lose a few birds, so what, and it was only during the process that they realized that, well, actually, humans are one of the species that we're talking about losing as part of this process. It's not just ugly beetles and some birds, that because ultimately climate change is one of the drivers of biodiversity loss. But biodiversity loss is a much, much bigger issue than climate change, and because it affects everything from the food we eat and the water we drink. If we don't start protecting our habitats and protecting our species, then we're going to die, and we will be the first civilization that actually contributed to killing ourselves, so but that conversation is happening. The academics knew all of this and they've known it for many, many years, but the Irish citizens now, because of the transparency associated with the assembly, are now starting to understand, which means that when the political system engages and rolls out perhaps a referendum, but also legislative change, the public will be much more receptive. So in the longer term, is a very long way of saying that in the longer term, spending that 6 months on a citizens' assembly under the public spotlight shortens the difficulties that the political system has in rolling out difficult change at the other end. So it helps rather than lengthens the process.
Yep. Thank you. And thanks to Thorsten, who's also putting in some good links in the chat. Sorry, Polly, did you want to add something to that?
No, I think that was brilliantly said.
Great. Thank you. There was just one question a little bit further up from Carl around despite obviously our parliament changing its shape in the last election, we still do have the dominance of a two-party system. So how do you get momentum for citizens' assemblies if, how do you get that political will when we're not forcing them into a position?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. And I think we sort of touched on it earlier in the increase of independents now that are in the House of Representatives as well as the Senate. And, we've really seen that with David Pocock holding such power. And, I think it's an interesting climate really in that sense politically, because, when you sort of erode some of that two-party dominance, as Art was sort of saying, you're going to need to have some more of that sort of coalition and collaboration building that goes on in politics. And we've already seen in the 6 months of this new government, a lot of that crossbench really working hard to get different things across. And what they stand for is, candidly pretty obviously and overtly aligned with what we're trying to talk about, which is bringing about more, centering more of everyday Australians' voices in the decision-making process. And it's, important, of course, that you have industry and private sector and, unions and lobbyists and all of that in the mix, but they shouldn't be shouting the loudest. And those have been the voices that have been exceptionally loud for a long time, I suppose, in Parliament House. So the beauty of this is it provides an alternative mechanism, I suppose, to really insert the voices of everyday people into that conversation, and having people within the current political structure, within Parliament, calling for the need of that, calling, to have a way to bring everyday voices and centering those. It's a really exciting moment to build momentum around and to bring about this sort of change.
Absolutely. Did you mention the summit already? Did you want to talk about what you're planning the second half of next year?
I did briefly, but what's so key with this conversation, we're not yet fortunate enough in the context that Art is in Ireland, where the majority of everyday people now know about these processes, and indeed, what was it, 40% actually get their trusted source of information. We're a long way away from that in Australia, and so really trying to spread awareness around these ideas is kind of paramount to what we're trying to do. So the summit next year will be specifically targeted towards advocacy groups and those sorts of issue-based groups and organizations, so that they're familiar as well. I think understanding the potential that can be unlocked when you use these sorts of processes. There's so many issues around housing and health and climate that people are concerned with, and following that same path of sort of banging the fist on the table and demanding action, and these are our demands, doesn't always get the cut through, of course, that they're looking for. And so unlocking what could a citizens' assembly achieve on this issue is sort of our next proposal with the summit, to bring people together to have that conversation, indeed in an environment that is similar to a citizens' assembly. So it would be something that you would also experience to an extent by coming along to it.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully we can all stay in touch and hear more about that summit as it develops. So we are getting really close to wrapping up. I would like to thank our speakers, Art, O'Leary and Polly, so much for their time, and particularly Art for sharing your very early morning with us and being just so immaculately presented in your suit and tie at such an early part of the day. We really appreciate it, and all of your storytelling and sharing. It's just incredibly inspiring, and all strengths to you and the great work that you do over in Ireland. And thank you, Polly. Thank you for championing citizens' assemblies in Australia and seizing this moment that we have. Thank you to everyone who stayed on the call. We will be sending a recording of this discussion out to everyone who registered for today, and we look forward to staying in touch. I think that Ollie has shared our contact details in the chat, but you will just know where to find us, just to Google Mannifera and Change Politics. Thank you everyone so much.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Art. Thanks everyone.
No trouble. See you all soon. Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.